Chapter 6:15. Ren panicked and wanted to stop them, but he couldn't do anything as he watched the three problem children bully the black rabbit. Wu Ming, Letitia, and Lily went to the houses of No Name. Wu Ming's intention was to renovate No Name's house as well. After all, it was a bit awkward to have a bunch of broken houses on such a large piece of land. Therefore, with Ren's approval, Wu Ming followed Lily to the houses. "Master, do you know how to repair houses?" Letitia asked respectfully, but it sounded like she was doubtful. "Master, these houses don't have any life force, and many of them have already collapsed. It will be difficult to repair them." Hearing Letitia's words, Wu Ming looked at some of the collapsed houses on the outskirts of No Name's territory. No Name was once the largest community in the East District. Therefore, this piece of land that was once the largest community in the East District was naturally huge. It was impossible to only build a few houses in the center. There must be some houses in the entire territory. But because of the Demon King's attack, as well as the desolation of the land, it was already very difficult for the people of No Name to repair the houses in the center. Therefore, in these 3 years, the houses in No Name's territory were basically not repaired by the people of No Name. Therefore, these houses had already collapsed. Not only that, many of the houses in the center of No Name's territory had also collapsed. As the largest community in the East District, the house in the center was actually quite big. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a castle. Well, as a box world with many gods and Buddhas, basically every community that was slightly stronger had this kind of Western castle-style residence. The castle was connected to the outside with a huge reservoir. At this moment, the reservoir was filled with incomparably clean water. It was the water provided by defeating the water god and obtaining the water tree sapling. In the beginning, when the black rabbit placed the water tree sapling on the small platform in the middle of the reservoir, the water that instantly covered the entire reservoir made the birds from the past excited for a while. The clean reservoir complemented the land that was full of life, but it was surrounded by castle-like houses that looked like they had been abandoned for a long time. This was an existence that was rather inconsistent with the land and the pool. Therefore, Wu Ming decided to first repair the houses here, and then take care of the other houses. "Letitia, I really don't have the ability to repair houses." Looking at these castle-like houses that looked like dilapidated houses, Silent Wonder spoke to Letitia without looking back. Lily, who was listening on the side, was stunned. "So embarrassing. Why did you come back if you don't have the ability to repair houses?" But Letitia was waiting for Wu Ming to continue. "But we have this." Wu Ming raised his arm, and the small golem statue appeared once again. Without saying anything, Wu Ming directly infused magic power into the stone statue. The moment the statue's eyes to Letitia, the statues to be activated. Then, a dark purple ripple appeared beside Wu Ming. It was a skill that Wu Ming often used, portal. However, this wasn't a portal. It was a passage that Wu Ming created to spawn magic puppets. You see, isn't Yggdrasil a game? Basically, all the ripples in this game are in the form of portals. They are all purplish-black ripples. Although it was a bit of a shoddy job, at least it was useful. It could spawn monsters. Suddenly, a stone pillar came out of the dark purple portal. Taking a closer look, it wasn't a stone pillar. It was clearly the leg of a magic puppet. Then, a 5-meter-tall stone giant with red eyes and a body made of hard white stone walked out and stood beside Wu Ming. Then, Silent Cry stopped channeling mana into the golem statue in his hand, and the purple-black ripples disappeared. Of course, it wasn't that Wu Ming didn't want to work anymore. He just wanted to see if this magic puppet could meet his requirements. "Go repair the damaged house." Wu Ming ordered the magic puppet. Originally, monsters that were summoned by a tool that could summon unlimited monsters wouldn't listen to the summoner's orders. However, magic puppets were different. In the game Yggdrasil, they wouldn't move unless there was a master or a leader who gave the order. Normally, the magic puppet would be in a standby state. Only when a high-level magic creature or its master gave it an order would the magic puppet begin to move according to the order given. Therefore, Yggdrasil originally didn't have a tool that could summon magic puppets like this. However, after Wu Ming found out that there was a tool that could summon unlimited demons, Wuming created a tool that could summon magic puppets based on that tool. Well, actually, it was because Wuming was tired of making magic puppets one by one during the battle against Darius. Even with the help of Ain's Ergong, Wuming didn't have to make magic puppets one by one. That was a very troublesome thing for Wuming. Therefore, Wuming used his own grand creation item to create a modified version of the Magic Puppet Unlimited summoning tool based on the tool that could summon unlimited demons. By controlling the amount of magic power released, one could control the number of magic puppets that could be produced. One could also choose the type of magic puppet that could be produced. Another thing was that it could be turned off or turned on at any time. The tool that could summon unlimited demons couldn't be turned off once it was started. Therefore, it was a very rare tool. Wuming's tool was even more cheat-like. It could be turned on or off at any time. In addition to being able to control the amount and speed of production, and choose the type of magic puppet that could be produced, this tool was comparable to a god-tier tool. If it wasn't for the fact that the magic puppets produced weren't very strong, they would be close to a world-class tool. All in all, the monsters produced by this tool could be controlled. Otherwise, Wuming wouldn't be at ease to give it to children. After hearing Wuming's words, the magic puppet immediately walked towards the house in front of it. Because of its weight, every step the magic puppet took shook the ground. If it wasn't for Wuming giving life to the ground and making the ground solid, the magic puppet would have probably sunk into the sand and left a footprint on the ground. In short, the magic puppet began its performance. Chapter 6:16. Oh, so this is the magic puppet you summoned with your item. It looks quite sturdy. I wonder if it can take a punch from me. I'm getting excited. 16 Knights, who was attracted by the magic puppet, walked to Wuming with her arms crossed. Please don't attack it. If you punch it, it will probably be reduced to rubble. Wuming looked at 16 Knights helplessly. At this time, Ku Asuka's voice came from the other side of Wuming. Ku Asuka patted Wuming's arm with excitement and curiosity. The stone giant in the fairy tale. I didn't expect to see one in the Hakata world. This is the first time I've seen one. As expected, a common monster like the stone giant would be the most familiar monster in the eyes of ordinary people. Yes, then can you stop hitting me? Wuming resisted powerlessly. Although he wouldn't get hurt, it didn't feel good. I didn't expect you to be so chaste. 16 Knights also looked at Ku Asuka with a mocking expression. How would a villain like you understand my interest? Ku Asuka didn't back down and replied to 16 Knights, but her eyes were still on the magic puppet. From Wuming's point of view, Ku Asuka didn't look like someone who was interested in fairy tales. She looked more like someone who was interested in strange creatures. This probably had something to do with Ku Asuka's era. After World War II, there probably wasn't much entertainment. This was especially true for Jiu Yuanfei, who was the young mistress of the family. She must have been extremely busy back then. Wuming guessed. However, Wuming's guess was the opposite of the truth. Ku Asuka, who had the ability to control, wasn't bothered by her responsibilities as a young lady. How is it going to repair the damaged house? Haruihibu asked. Since 16 Knights and Ku Asuka had lost interest in the Black Rabbit, then Haruihibu, who was a problem child, naturally followed along. Wuming looked at the Black Rabbit that was being supported by Ren with pity. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he shook his head. Then Wuming answered Haruihibu's question. It naturally has its own unique method. I guarantee that it will be unexpected and reasonable. Wuming crossed his arms and waited for the magic puppet's performance. The magic puppet walked up to No Name, which was a huge building that looked like a castle, and slowly stopped in front of it. Because the other members of No Name had taken care of it for the past 3 years, the castle-like building only had some minor damage and color faded. However, the magic puppet didn't care how it was damaged or how badly it was damaged. It only knew that it needed to fix this place. Then the magic puppet itself disintegrated. That's right. The stone golem had disintegrated into a pile of rubble. These rubble combined with the rubble of the collapsed walls. And under the influence of its own mana, the rubble wrapped around the castle-shaped building. In an instant, the 5-meter-tall stone giant, at the cost of losing its own body, repaired the building that looked damaged. Even the outer walls of the castle were rearranged by the stone giant's stone pieces. The missing parts were repaired, and the old parts were disintegrated by the magic puppet into fine dust. The entire outer wall was repaired by the magic puppet, and it looked like a newly built building. This is really not simple. This stone giant's limbs are developed, but its brain is quite good. Black Rabbit, who was being supported by Wooming, commented on the magic puppet summoned by Wooming. Seeing that she had just been played by the 3 problem children, Wooming didn't want to complain about the Black Rabbit anymore. In fact, it was because Wooming had given the magic puppet a command in advance. If there was a hole, it would be repaired. If there was a hole, it would be repaired. If there was a hole, it would be repaired. If there was a hole, it would be repaired. In short, as long as there was an imperfect place, the magic puppet would find it and repair it. But this way the efficiency has increased by a lot. Rin nodded as he looked at the magic puppet's repaired wall. There wasn't the slightest gap in the wall. It looked like a natural whole piece. Every piece of broken stone was tightly entwined with the building due to the influence of mana. It didn't look like it was made up of large pieces of broken stone. But if we use these magic puppets to repair all the buildings, won't it cause the building to collapse later? Haruai Hibu asked. Don't worry, the magic puppet's magic power will change the gaps between itself and the building it is attached to. It can fuse the two together. After a while, when the magic puppet's magic power is exhausted, it will fuse into the same material. Wooming's words made everyone feel relieved. Then let's continue, everyone. Wooming wasn't talking about the no-name people, but the magic puppets. Wooming began to inject magic power into the magic puppet in his hand again. This time, the amount of magic power injected was quite large. In an instant, a black and purple ripple appeared, and several 5-meter-tall figures walked out from it. It was the mass-produced version of the stone giant from the very beginning. When these stone giants came out, they each ran to the no-name houses. After the first batch of magic puppets left the ripple space, the second batch of magic puppets walked out with their hard legs, shaking the earth. In this way, Wooming continued to inject magic power into the magic puppet in his hand, and the same stone giant magic puppets came out from the black and purple ripple space. Looking at the no-name territory that seemed to have become a breeding ground for stone giants, everyone didn't know what to say. Actually, when the second batch of stone giants came out, everyone was already surprised. Well, if it was back to 16 nights, Wooming couldn't see whether he was surprised or not, but everyone was surprised. This was because Wooming's magic puppet summoned too many stone giants, and it didn't seem to stop. These stone giants were at most 6 digits, and 5 digits was impossible. However, if there was a community with countless 6-digit stone giants, then that community would be at the top of the 6-digit stone giants. Maybe even a 5-digit stone giant could try to level up. When Wooming said that he had a magic puppet that could summon an unlimited number of monsters, everyone was surprised, but they had never seen such a scene, so their surprise wasn't that high. However, after seeing such a scene, it was really shocking. There was no other way. These countless stone giants were really too spectacular. Rin thought for a moment, and began to mobilize. Since it's like this, then everyone, let's do a big cleaning of the no-name today. Oh, of course, it was Black Rabbit who shouted this. It was still very awkward in the situation where everyone was silent. However, this time it was a little better. Not only was Black Rabbit shouting, Lily was also embarrassed with her. Chapter 6:17. In the evening the sun had set. The entire no-name had entered a world of darkness. Wooming and the others stood in front of the brand new no-name base, full of joy and gratification as they looked at the renovated castle that looked brand new. This is great, our community finally has some semblance of what it used to be. Black Rabbit bounced around the group happily, just like a rabbit. That was indeed the case. No-name was built 3 years ago. Although it wasn't very luxurious, it still had a grand atmosphere, unlike now where the land was abandoned and the buildings were damaged. Therefore, after Wooming used the magic puppets to roughly repair the no-name buildings, a brand new and more simple building complex appeared in front of everyone. This made the original no-name members quite moved. There was nothing more exciting than falling from a high place to a low place, and then climbing back up. Not to mention Black Rabbit, Letitia and the other old members of No Name. Even the new members like 16 Knights had a satisfied look on their faces. However, at the beginning, they had a shameless look on their faces as they refused to do it. What was going on? The situation was like this. When Ren proposed a thorough cleaning, everyone readily agreed, except for the 3 problem children, who were unwilling. Boring not doing it. I'm a lady. If the 2 of them don't want to do it, then I don't want to do it either. Then, when Wuming suggested that they could command the small magic puppets to clean, the 3 problem children's eyes lit up. Then, he led the special-shaped magic puppet that Wuming had summoned with an item, and left to clean up the mess. They were very interested in magic puppets, so how could they let go of such an opportunity to command magic puppets? As for the special magic puppets, they were basically the size of a person, large enough to walk into a house. There were no such magic puppets in Yggdrasil, but they couldn't resist Wuming's methods. Even the tools were modified by Wuming himself, so adding some special magic puppets was no problem at all. After all, magic puppets could be casually made. The essence of a magic puppet was a pile of rocks. Fire magic puppets, steel magic puppets, and the like were just a pile of rocks with a ball of flame or a large amount of iron added to it. Just like that, Wuming, Letitia, and Lily repaired the buildings on the outside, while Run, Black Rabbit, and the 3 problem children cleaned up the inside. With almost unlimited magic puppets, whether it was repairing the buildings on the outside or cleaning on the inside, with these magic puppets and other people's commands, the efficiency could be said to be quite fast. If that wasn't the case, they wouldn't have been able to clean up all the buildings in No Name's territory in less than a day. By the way, while a large number of magic puppets were working, they also attracted the attention of more than 100 children from No Name. When the children asked for the reason, Wuming directly pushed the credit to Run, making Run, as the leader of the community, rise in the children's hearts. This made Run somewhat helpless, but after all, Wuming had already said it, and even through the tools that were always activated into Ren's hands. In the end, Ren had no choice but to admit it on the spot. Wuming nodded his head in satisfaction as he stood in front of the majestic, No Name, white building complex that was filled with an ancient aura. Although the color is a bit monotonous, at least the quality is not bad. How could the quality be bad when using bricks worth 6 digits to build a house? It was already very extravagant, okay? After all, Villo, you only summoned white magic puppets. How could the color not be monotonous? As a sensitive beauty, Jiao Fei Niao was very dissatisfied with the pure white bricks provided by Wuming. After all, rendering multiple colors was the most suitable color for a beautiful girl. That's too troublesome. It's more efficient to only produce the same type of magic puppet. Wuming shrugged his shoulders. Just like Gorgon, who had Tiamat's 100 beast power, she only produced the same type of magic beast at the beginning, but after a long time, she began to produce other types of magic beast. Because of the high efficiency, Wuming was the same. Copying and pasting the same magic puppet would definitely be more efficient than creating a different type. Although this was a tool that could summon unlimited magic puppets, after all, this was a tool that Wuming had modified himself, and Wuming's setting was that the user could choose the type of magic puppet. All in all, the final result was very good. Alright, we've been busy for a day, and the results are not bad. Everyone go rest. At this time, Ren came out to show his effectiveness as a leader. That's true, this is the result of everyone's hard work. If we don't go in and try, we'll be wasting our efforts. Black Rabbit playfully closed one of her eyes and said to everyone. After all, what she said made sense, and it was already late, so everyone entered the finished building. As soon as they entered, they saw some magic puppets standing like guards in the No Name Hall. These were the magic puppets that Wuming had specially created to clean the interior of the problem children. When all the buildings were repaired, Wuming had also taught Ren to stop summoning magic puppets. And because these magic puppets didn't need to sacrifice their own bodies to repair the buildings, they were only used as coolies for cleaning, so these magic puppets didn't disappear. And now, they were standing like guards in the building, so it was probably the work of the 3 problem children. Everyone looked at 16 Knights and the other 2. 16 knights and the other two didn't panic at all. Isn't this great, magic puppet guards? 16 knights waved his hand. It's not a good habit to waste things. Jiu Yuao crossed her arms and said seriously, after all, they couldn't just let these magic puppets stand outside or waste them. This looks pretty good. Haruai Hiroyuki didn't feel that he did anything wrong, so he had an innocent expression. Being guards isn't bad after all, these magic puppets have 6-digit strength, so they're still useful for the current no-name. After all, having a group of 6-digit guards was quite beneficial for the no-name, which was 95% children. Just like when guards sent people to capture the no-name children, if Wuming, 16 knights, and the others weren't there, there was a high chance that they would have succeeded. Although Black Rabbit wasn't weak, she wasn't good at playing dirty. If she couldn't find those people, Black Rabbit couldn't do anything, right? Then everyone go to sleep, Ren said with concern. However, the 3 problem children and Wuming didn't move. Master? Letitia asked doubtfully. Following Wuming's gaze, Ren, Letitia, and the others looked at the table. There was a letter on it, and the symbol was a Valkyrie looking at each other. That was the symbol of this and yes. However, Ren, Black Rabbit, and the others had the same thought. It's over. Chapter 6:18. Why was it over? Because it was a letter from that and yes, and no name, and that and yes didn't have much contact. The only contact they had was with White Yiksha. Therefore, this letter was most likely sent by White Yiksha. And for White Yiksha to send a letter, something must have happened. The unknown was like catmint to a cat. It was quite attractive to children. And being targeted by problem children was a disaster in the eyes of benevolent Black Rabbit. It wasn't enough that he had harmed his own family, now he had to go out and harm others. Therefore, Black Rabbit's hair color changed, and then he suddenly jumped in the direction of the letter. Black Rabbit wanted to keep the letter in his pocket in advance. In short, he couldn't let the 3 problem children see the contents of the letter first. However, although Black Rabbit was fast, he couldn't beat 16 knights. 16th Knights also jumped, but compared to Black Rabbit's jump, 16th Knight's jump was much more impressive. A strong hurricane swept past the no-name people, blowing their sleeves. The most pitiful one was Jiu Fei Niao, who was desperately holding on to her dress. Then Wuming considerately waved his hand, canceling out the hurricane caused by 16 Knight's jump. Thanks. Jiu Fei Niao casually but elegantly responded to Wuming's gentlemanly behavior. You're welcome. Wuming shook his head indifferently. After a simple exchange, the two's gazes returned to the battle between 16 Knights and Black Rabbit for the letter. 16 Knights and Black Rabbit were already in front of the letter, but if one looked closely, 16 Knights was in the lead. Damn it. For the future of the community, Black Rabbit will definitely not give this letter to Mr. 16 Knights. Black Rabbit suddenly exploded again. Oh. You're quite motivated. If you want to stop me for the future of the community, then come and try. 16 Knights laughed wantonly, and then suddenly sped up. The two reached out a hand almost at the same time, reaching for the letter on the table. But an accident happened. The shockwave from the impact of the powerful speed directly shattered the fragile table, and the envelope was blown to the side. 16 Knights and Black Rabbit quickly adjusted their bodies and turned to the other side of the envelope. However, the position of the envelope was now closer to 16 Knights, which made Black Rabbit panic. Just as 16 Knights was about to touch the envelope, a small black-purple ripple suddenly appeared under the envelope and devoured it. This caused 16 Knights to frown, while Black Rabbit heaved a sigh of relief. This was because no matter who got the letter, it couldn't fall into the hands of a problem child. Hey, little brother, what do you mean by this? Are you trying to pick a fight with me? 16 Knights turned around and glared at Wuming. He saw that Wuming was holding the envelope that had been swallowed by the blackish-purple ripple, and a small blackish-purple ripple was slowly disappearing above Wuming's arm. What? Mr. Villo. This made Black Rabbit, who had just heaved a sigh of relief, tense up again. Looking at it now, the small blackish-purple ripple was indeed his ability to teleport. The Black Rabbit reacted. It's over. Black Rabbit's ears drooped. Although Wu-ming said that he was stable during this period, Black Rabbit still couldn't forget that Wu-ming's nature was also a problem child. Alright, half a problem. However, half a problem child was still a problem child. At this moment, Black Rabbit's back was already gray, and she seemed to have seen the end of the community. You don't have to be so dramatic. Wu-ming shrugged. Don't worry, I won't give it to the 3 problem children, just trust me. Wu-ming's words gave Black Rabbit hope. Mr. Villo. Black Rabbit looked at Wu-ming touched. It seemed that half a problem child wouldn't mix with a real problem child. Then Wu-ming gave Black Rabbit a trust me look, and then looked at 16 Knights. Stealing the other party's prey would definitely make the other party unhappy. Even if it was Wu-ming, 16 Knights wouldn't forgive it. Then Wu-ming smiled at 16 Knights, opened the envelope, and read 10 lines at a glance. Black Rabbit was surprised at Wu-ming's action of opening the letter. However, if Wu-ming could not tell 16 Knights and the others the content, then she could understand. Then, Wu-ming read the main content of the letter under Black Rabbit's petrified figure. I see, the North District is holding a fire dragon birth ceremony. This is an invitation letter from White Yiksha. Fire dragon birth ceremony? Jioyu Asuka and Haruai Hiroyuki were confused. Including the North District's art and crafts, as well as the appraisal, there will be many gift competitions, and the central event is scheduled to be a large-scale ceremony for the rulers of the class. That's what the letter says, but I think 16 Knights should be interested. Wu-ming squinted his eyes and smiled at reverse 16 Knights. At the same time, he revealed a meaningful smile. Of course, I'm very interested in it. 16 Knights against the wind laughed. Then Black Rabbit cried. You problematic children, ah. After Letitia and Lily comforted Black Rabbit, everyone returned to their rooms to sleep. Although the 3 problem children were indeed too excited to sleep, even though Black Rabbit was crying, she still shouldered the heavy responsibility of being the mother of no-name problem children and kept the letter. If you want to go to the North District to participate in the Fire Dragon birth ceremony, then go to sleep. Under Black Rabbit's reprimand, the 3 problematic children gave her face and returned to their rooms to sleep. Wu-ming also returned to his room with Letitia under Black Rabbit's resentful gaze. However, Black Rabbit was helpless. Wu-ming didn't lie to her. Wu-ming didn't show 16 Knights and the other 2 problematic children the letter. He read it out for the 3 problematic children. After all, Wu-ming followed the rules, so Black Rabbit couldn't say anything. She could only use her eyes to express her silent resentment. As for Wu-ming bringing Letitia back to his room, it was naturally because the maid had to help the master change his clothes to sleep. Of course, although accompanying the master to sleep was within Letitia's acceptable range as a maid, after all, Wu-ming didn't have that intention. Therefore, when Wu-ming began to sleep, Letitia left Wu-ming's room. However, Letitia, who had the key to Wu-ming's room, still stood in front of Wu-ming the next morning before he woke up. When Wu-ming opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was this pretty lowly girl in front of him. It's morning. Wu-ming shook his head, trying to wake up. Yes, master. It's already morning. 16 Knights and the others can't wait. This made Wu-ming smile helplessly. Then let's exhaust their patience. Then Letitia helped Wu-ming wash up and change his clothes. Let's go, Letitia. Let's see how the problematic children are doing. Chapter 619. After quickly finishing his breakfast, Wu-ming went to the hall where the members of No Name usually gathered. Then, Wu-ming opened the door and walked in with Letitia. Hey, bro, we woke up so early without the blonde lowly's service. Why did you wake up so late? As soon as he entered, Wu-ming heard 16 Knights teasing him. It's obviously the 3 of you who are too excited. My biological clock is normal. He helplessly glanced at 16 Knights, Jioyuki, and Haruai Hibokushi before casually finding a sofa to sit down. Letitia made Wu-ming some black tea. Give me a cup too, thank you. Seeing Letitia's action, Jioyuki smiled and raised her hand. Me too. Haruai Hibokushi's delicate little face sparkled with interest. He looked like a kitten that was interested in the black tea. Then give me a cup too. 16 Knights naturally didn't have much interest in the black tea, But since everyone ordered it, he also ordered a cup with the intention of tasting it. What do you think Letitia is? She's my personal maid, Wu Ming said with slight jealousy. At the same time, he narrowed his eyes and helplessly looked at the three problem children. Ha! That's funny. I won Letitia. It's just that you used your ability to take advantage of the loophole. 16 Knights responded uncomfortably. Letitia ruined the gift competition that we were going to participate in. Making some black tea as compensation shouldn't be a problem. Jiyuki hit the main point. That's right. Villo is so stingy. Haruai Hibakushi hugged the three-furred cat and looked at Wu Ming with disdain. The three problem children's counterattack made Wu Ming not know whether to laugh or cry. You're the only one with a lot of twisted logic, Wu Ming replied unyieldingly. After that, he didn't say anything else. Letitia also brewed black tea for 4 people. The conversation between the 4 of them was just a casual joke. Therefore, Letitia still brewed black tea for 16 Knights and the others. Then, while Letitia was making tea, Wu Ming started talking to 16 Knights and the other 2. Where's Run and Black Rabbit? The 2 of them should have woken up already. Why don't I see them? Wu Ming asked. Because Black Rabbit had a problem child in no name. He woke up very early every day in order to supervise the problem child. As for Run, he also showed a slightly excited expression yesterday. After all, Run was still an 11-year-old child, and it was inevitable that he would be interested in the sacrifice. Therefore, Wu Ming judged that the 2 of them must have woken up. Moreover, they had agreed to go to White Yiksha's place today to see how the fire dragon's birth ceremony was going. As the leader of the community, Run he had to look after the 3 problem children. It was impossible for Black Rabbit to be absent. Run went to the library after breakfast. Black Rabbit is helping Lily and the others with farming. Haruai Hiroyuki answered Wu Ming's question. As the leader of the community, Run naturally seized the time to learn all kinds of knowledge. Therefore, it was understandable that he went to the underground library after breakfast to learn. Black Rabbit's words were also understandable. While repairing the buildings, Wu Ming also gave the magic puppet authority to the members of No Name. Naturally, this included Lily and the others. With the magic puppets, Lily and the other logistics team could cultivate crops more easily. Therefore, taking advantage of this opportunity, Lily took a few magic puppets to the city early in the morning. She used the event funds to buy various kinds of crop seeds and seedlings. Then, she let the magic puppets bring a lot of seeds and seedlings. It had to be said that this time, Lily was in the limelight of No Name. A 6-digit number was already a very strong existence among the 7-digit number. Everyone in the city knew that Lily, a normal member of No Name, actually had a few 6-digit magic puppets. This naturally caused a huge uproar. However, it seemed that some people had found out through the grapevine that a strong person had joined No Name. Everyone no longer viewed No Name as a group of trash. Therefore, there were no more attempts to steal Lily's magic puppet from them. However, this time No Name's reputation was one step higher. After that, Lily, who came back, breathed a sigh of relief and began to cultivate. As a restless black rabbit, she naturally had to find something for herself to do. Moreover, with such a large piece of land, how could she not use it properly? Now was not the same as before. Now there was no lack of labor, seeds, water, soil. Everything was available. Therefore, the little fox girl Lily began to cultivate with a dozen or so slightly older children. Black Rabbit also began to plan the use of No Name's land. Then Wu Ming's eyes turned cold. He found a problem. It seemed that everyone woke up earlier than him. After realizing this, Wu Ming felt a little awkward. Lily had already woken up early, and so did Black Rabbit. Although Run was a child, he did not want to disappoint the community after the renovation, so he directly woke up early and began to bury his head in the library. The 3 problem children were so excited that they could not sleep and woke up early, so he directly ignored them. They are all working hard, Wu Ming said as he picked up the black tea that Letitia brewed and drank it. After all, there are many things to be done in the community. This is normal. Jiu Fei Niao also drank the black tea that Letitia brewed. Not bad, Letitia. I am a little envious of the Villo, Jiu Fei Niao said with jealousy. If Fei Niao still wants to drink, I can make some for you in the future. Letitia smiled slightly. Really? Then it's a deal. Jiu Fei Niao's eyes lit up, and then continued to drink the tea. Beside Jiu Fei Niao, Haruai Hiroyuki dipped his finger in the tea, and put it in front of Sanmao's mouth to let Sanmao taste it first. Sanmao said that it smells good. Haruai Hiroyuki had the ability to communicate with animals, so no one thought that it was strange for her to talk to a cat. As long as you like it. Letitia nodded with a smile. On the other side of the single-seater sofa opposite Wu Ming, the villainous 16 Knights reverse drank the black tea in a very standard manner. Ha! This black tea is really good. Reverse 16 Knights reverse praised. Of course, this was the black tea that Luos drank in Perseus. With that hedonistic second-generation heir's spirit of enjoyment, this tea would definitely be of excellent quality. I really underestimated you, 16 Kun. I didn't expect a villainess like you to have such good taste in black tea. Jiu Fei Niao tasted the fragrance of the tea. Indeed, reverse 16 Knights reverse did not seem like a newbie's tea drinking method, but more like a veteran aristocrat who had been drinking for a long time. Because I am a villainous person with such good taste. Reverse 16 Knights reverse shamelessly smiled. Ka! At this moment the door was opened. A pair of blue rabbit ears entered the four's eyes. Everyone, are you ready? We are going to visit Lord Byakuya. Then the four, including Wu Ming, smiled confidently. Of course. 4. Chapter 620. Thousand Eyes Branch. Wu Ming, Letitia, 16th Knights, Flying Bird, Dazzle, Run and Black Rabbit sat in a row. And in front of the 6 of them sat White Yiksha. Thou came rather quickly. White Yiksha used a paper fan to cover the lower half of his face. His eyes were slightly closed as though he had just woken up. After all, we have quite a number of problem children here. Furthermore, it's a grand memorial. There's nothing wrong with being a little more proactive, right? Wu Ming joked with White Yiksha. Indeed. White Yiksha glanced at 16 Knights and the other 2. During this period of time, the names of the 3 problem children of no name were well known in the lower levels of the East District. Even White Yiksha had heard of them. Then White Yiksha, it's about time you tell us the truth. 16th Knights didn't mind White Yiksha's gaze as he asked a question that puzzled Run and Black Rabbit. What do you mean? Black Rabbit's ears perked up as he asked. Run and Black Rabbit couldn't understand 16th Knights' words. From their point of view, it was only because of no-name's strength that they were invited by White Yiksha, who was the ruler of the social strata. Although your thoughts aren't wrong, how can it be that simple? It could only be said that their thoughts were too easy to guess. 16th Knights could tell at a glance. First of all, there's a problem with this fire dragon's birth ritual. Then 16th Knights looked at Wu Ming. Brother, you should be able to tell, right? Wu Ming nodded. It's clearly a ceremony in the North District, but it has to be held together with the East District. There's clearly a problem. With that, Run and Black Rabbit also understood. That's right. Although the relationship between the various strata wasn't bad, it wasn't good either. No, it should be said that they didn't interfere with each other and didn't interact with each other. After all, the difference was too great. Even if they wanted to interact, it was very difficult. Therefore, even if it was a rare grand memorial in the North District, there was no need to hold it together with the East District. Furthermore, you even called us over. I'm afraid there's something special you need us to do. Then 16th Knight smiled. I can't wait. However, the smile of this problematic child made Black Rabbit and Rin a little worried. Oh, your thoughts are still very clear, Villo and 16 Knights of Reverse. White Yiksha praised the 2 of them. But even if nothing happened, I was prepared to invite all of you to this memorial ceremony. In other words, did something really happen, Lord White Yiksha? Black Rabbit began to feel nervous. Before I begin to explain this matter, I'll say that I received the invitation before the preparations for this memorial ceremony. This was also why White Yiksha said that he would invite, no name, even if there was no emergency. However, some time ago, a member of Thousand Yes who had been sleeping suddenly woke up and made a prophecy. Immediately after, Yiksha's expression froze. A devil king will attack during the fire dragon birth ceremony. As soon as he said that, Runha and Heitu's face tightened. The three problem children became excited. Only Wuming's face did not change. May I ask how accurate the prophecy is? Haruhito Hikari asked. After all, a prophecy was just a prophecy. There were times when things like this were wrong, although it was rare. Runha and Heitu looked at White Yiksha's answer expectantly. Having experienced the Devil King's attack, they felt lucky about this prophecy. 100%. White Yiksha's words were like a sharp blade that pierced into Runha and Heitu's hearts, shattering their expectations. It's a pity. Although I also want to treat this prophecy as that member's wrong prophecy. That member's prophecies have always been 100% successful. There has never been a single failure. This is really a regrettable result. 16th Knights of Reverse said casually, sounding like he was gloating. However, everyone present understood that this was the characteristic of a problematic child like 16th Knights of Reverse. To put it nicely, he spoke without mercy. To put it bluntly, he had a foul mouth. Lord White Yiksha, did you specifically look for us because of the Devil King's attack? Black Rabbit appeared serious and serious. After all, he was a Devil King. He could not afford to relax at all. Of course. Didn't you use defeating the Devil King as your common slogan? Then you have to be more realistic. Otherwise, you will become a joke to others. White Yiksha chuckled, looking rather wretched. Of course, before you make a move on the Devil King, I will take care of him, White Yiksha said proudly. Wuming had learned some things about White Yiksha in advance, so Wuming did not doubt White Yiksha's arrogant words at all. Even 16th Knights, Flying Bird, and Radiance had learned about White Yiksha after living in this world for so long. Sun and White Knight's Star Spirit, originally a two-digit Devil King, materialized by the heavenly shaking prophecy. Furthermore, even if his strength was negated and weakened because of the heavenly shaking prophecy, his combat strength could still be ranked in the top 10. In order to reassure the gods and Buddhas, he voluntarily lowered his spirit level and accepted the Yiksha divinity of Buddhism, becoming the current ruler of the East District. Although White Yiksha's strength was weakened again after accepting the Yiksha divinity of Buddhism, he was not someone that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could ignore. At the very least, one had to have a 3-digit strength to be able to compete with the current White Yiksha. In other words, if the number of Devil Kings attacking at the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony was below 3 digits, then there was no chance of winning against White Yiksha. And if a 3-digit Devil King appeared in the lower levels, the gods and Buddhas in the upper levels would not sit idly by. White Yiksha accepted the Yiksha divinity and weakened her strength because she wanted to become the ruler of the lower levels with a 2-digit strength and protect the people. Otherwise, the gods and Buddhas in the upper levels would not allow her to descend. Although White Yiksha was said to be the strongest in the middle and lower levels, Wuming was still a little worried. Don't underestimate the enemy, White Yiksha. The news that you will host the biggest gift competition with the ruler of the North District must have spread. It's impossible that the attacking Devil King did not receive the news. Although Wuming did not finish his sentence, everyone understood what Wuming meant. Knowing that White Yiksha would attend the North District's Grand Memorial Ceremony and still come to attack, this Devil King must have been prepared. Speaking of which, is the reason why the East and North District are holding the ceremony together because of the Devil King's attack? Haruhito Hikari raised his doubts. Then White Yiksha calmly said something that surprised everyone. Actually, the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony is held by the East and North District in name, but in reality, I'm the only one from the East District. Oh, so that's why you came to us, no name? Chapter 621. North District 54545 Outer Gate, at the entrance of the Here and Yes store. In the distance, a huge red boundary wall that separated the East and North Districts stood there, and the boundary couldn't be seen on both sides of the boundary wall. Gothic spires were scattered all over the city, and there were traces of reclamation on the boundary wall, and some places were hollowed out as exhibition halls. A large number of glass artworks were placed on the streets and in front of shops. As if to add to the atmosphere, there were candlesticks and clown-like people walking on the streets. A walking candlesticks? Jiuyuki excitedly pulled Haruai Hiroyuki. It's true, this place is completely different from the East District. Although she wasn't as excited as Jiuyuki, she was still quite surprised. It seemed that the fact that this was the North District had been confirmed. It seems that White Yiksha didn't lie to us. Then what was that trick just now? Compared to confirming whether this was the North District, 16 Knights was more interested in White Yiksha's trick. It's just a small trick. The branches of here and yes are the same. They all have the ability to transfer to each other. White Yiksha pointed at the branch behind him that was exactly the same as the East District's, here and yes. So that's how it is. Renha Black Rabbit nodded. Wuming didn't think that transferring between the North District and East District was as simple as White Yiksha said. Wuming noticed a strong spatial fluctuation. Wuming could determine that no one present except himself and White Yiksha noticed the spatial fluctuation. It seems that White Yiksha really can't be underestimated. Wuming thought. Well, the North District has a completely different culture from the East District, so you should enjoy yourselves before the ceremony begins. After all, if he didn't smooth out the anger of these problem children, they would cause a ruckus when the ceremony officially began. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. White Yiksha waved his hand and left. Seeing 16 Knights and the others' interest, Wuming didn't suppress it, but went along with it. Then let's start shopping. In fact, this sentence was said to the 3 problem children. Then we'll go first. 16 Knights said goodbye, then walked toward the more prosperous central area with Jiuyuki and Haruai Hiroyuki. Wait, Black Rabbit is worried about you walking alone. Black Rabbit wants to follow you. Black Rabbit quickly said, then followed 16 Knights and the others. Sure enough, Black Rabbit was worried that the 3 problem children would cause trouble, so it sacrificed shopping time to supervise them. Wuming shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Then Wuming looked at Letitia, who was still in her maid uniform. Letitia, you go and help keep an eye on them. Yes, master. Letitia led aside then. Wuming looked at the last person around him, our leader, Ren. Actually, I also want to go for a walk. Ren, what are your plans? Wuming was asking if Ren wanted to be abandoned and walk alone, or to walk with Wuming. That, I want to visit my former ally. Ren awkwardly scratched the back of his head. Ally. Wuming was surprised, then he understood. After all, the predecessor of No Name was the largest community in the East District. It wasn't strange for them to have allies in other districts. Then I'll walk with you. After all, Wuming was slightly interested in this former ally. Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Villo. Ren nodded. After all, Ren was only an 11-year-old child. Walking alone in a place he had never been before would definitely cause him to be afraid. On the way to the ally that Ren mentioned, Wuming and Ren began to chat. Speaking of which, Ren, I didn't hear you mention that we have an ally. Wuming put his hands in his pockets, looked forward, and observed the surroundings. He seemed to ask casually. Actually, our No Name has already cut off contact with that ally for 3 years. Ren said without much confidence. Cut off contact, huh? Wuming looked at the surrounding scenery and narrowed his eyes. This made him think of a lot of things. It's the other party who unilaterally broke the contract, right? Wuming still asked casually. But when Ren heard Wuming's words, his body slightly stiffened. Then he immediately reacted. Well, after all, we are already No Name. It's not strange that they unilaterally broke the contract. Although that was what he said, the dispirited tone in Ren's voice was still obvious. What was the saying? When it rains, it pours. The current situation was exactly what it meant. After the Demon King's attack, the flag, name, and companions were all taken away, and then the other allies unilaterally broke the contract. Wu Ming believed that this kind of when it rains, it pours situation must have happened many times in the past 3 years. For Run He and Hei Tu to be able to hold on under such circumstances for 3 years, it could be said that the bitterness within was not enough to be told to outsiders. It was impossible to explain it all clearly in a short time. But after all, we are allies. A visit is still necessary, although it's a little. Ren lowered his head and told Wu Ming. But before Ren could finish, he was interrupted by Wu Ming. Pa dash Wu-ming suddenly put his hand on Ren's shoulder, and Ren subconsciously stopped. Mr. Villo? Ren looked at Wu-ming in confusion. Don't worry, Ren. If you want to go, then go boldly. I'm not even afraid of White Yiksha. Why would I be afraid of a bad ally who unilaterally broke the contract? Wu-ming smiled at Ren. Remember, although they looked down on us in the past, we will make them unworthy in the future. Wu-ming's words made Ren slightly stunned. But Ren did not think that Wu-ming's words were a bluff. It wasn't just the powerful Wu-ming, but with 16 knights and the other two, the rise of No Name was inevitable. Although the three of them were problem children, it was much better to do bad things than good things. Let's go, let's meet our ally. Okay. Because there was still some distance to go, Ren told Wu-ming about the community of this former ally. The 5-digit middle-level community, Salamandra, was based at the place where No Name and the others were at now, the outer gate of 54,545. It was a hereditary community with a flame dragon pattern as its flag. The members of the community had a wide range of viper bloodlines, and at the same time, they dominated many viper species. In short, it was a community based on group strength. Coincidentally, this was the opposite of the current No Name. The current No Name was a community of individual strength. After all, they were few in number but powerful. After Ren told Wu-ming the basic information, the two arrived at the entrance of Salamandra's base. Chapter 622. The base of Salamandra. In front of Wu-ming and Ren was not a large and imposing building. However, compared to the ordinary buildings around it, the base of Salamandra was clearly different and had a unique temperament. In front of the gate of the Salamandra base, there were two guards with dragon horns on their heads. Their faces were slightly red and ferocious, and they looked ferocious. There was no doubt that these two people had a trace of the fire dragon viper's blood in their bodies, which caused their faces to be slightly dragonized. Their faces were slightly red and they had dragon horns on their heads. One of the guards saw Wu-ming and Ren walk to the front of Salamandra's gate, and immediately stopped them. Please stop, this is Salamandra's base. Unrelated people are not allowed to enter. Although the guard used the word please, and his tone was not that bad, it was not friendly at all. After Wu-ming heard this, he could not help but laugh out loud. Seeing the two guards frowning because of Wu-ming's laughter, Ren nervously pulled on Wu-ming's sleeve, his eyes showing a trace of helplessness. Big brother, don't laugh. Can't you see that his eyes are not right? Wu-ming read such thoughts from Ren's eyes. However, Wu-ming could not help laughing. Although Ren had only been the leader for 3 years, as the leader of the allied community, the people of Salamandra did not recognize him, and even said something like, unrelated people. How could Wu-ming not laugh? However, it could also be confirmed that after Salamandra unilaterally broke the agreement with No Name, they really did not have any contact with No Name. Otherwise, how could the other party not recognize the leader of the allied community? From the time Ren told Wu-ming that Salamandra unilaterally broke the agreement, Wu-ming did not have a good impression of this community. Unilaterally kicking away an ally when it had no value, and without any reason at all, this was not how a person should behave. Although Wu-ming did not know what kind of mentality the leader of Salamandra had when he cooperated with No Name, but Wu-ming knew that the other party did not have any sincerity now. Since this was the case, then Wu-ming did not need to be friendly with the other party. Wu-ming stopped laughing and pressed Ren's shoulder, indicating for him to calm down. Then Wu-ming looked at the guard. Salamandra's ally in the East District is here to visit. Please inform them. Wu-ming's words were the same as the guard's before. Although his tone was not that bad, it was not friendly either. The guard's tone was not good, Wu-ming and Ren. However, Wu-ming's tone made the guard angry. How dare you? I have never heard of any alliance between Salamandra and the East District. Hurry up and leave this place. This is the base of Salamandra. We will not allow you people to behave so atrociously. The guard who asked the question earlier had an impatient look on his face, and pointed his spear at Wu-ming and Ren. Hurry up and leave. Salamandra is a middle-class community with a 5-digit number. If you continue to stay here, you will suffer. The other guard was slightly more friendly, and did not point his weapon at Wu-ming and Ren. He only waved his hand at the two of them, indicating for them to leave quickly. The two's actions reflected their personalities. It could only be said that they were worthy of having the fire dragon viper's bloodline. Their tempers were slightly irritable. Wuming was not angry because of these two small characters. Instead, he thought of something else. Since these two people were arranged to guard the door, it meant that their position in Salamandra was not high. It was not wrong for them to not know about the alliance between Salamandra and No Name. Looking at the two's actions, it did not seem like they were lying. In other words, the leader of Salamandra not only unilaterally broke the agreement with No Name, but also blocked the news. But thinking about it, it was not surprising that such a vulgar community could do such a thing. Thinking about this, Wuming stopped thinking about it and smiled at the guard who pointed his weapon at him. Bang! As if something exploded, a soft but hurried sound came from the guard's spear. This gave the guard a fright. Then he realized that his spear had broken. Clang! The spearhead fell to the ground and made a sound. Looks like Salamandra's weapon isn't that sturdy. It actually broke on its own after using it for a while. Wu Ming laughed mockingly. You bastard. What kind of strange gift did you use? The guard whose weapon broke retreated in panic. The other guard next to him held his spear and looked at Wu Ming cautiously. Then he ordered the guard who retreated 2 steps. Hurry and call for help. It seemed that this guard was more experienced than the hot-tempered guard. But in Wu Ming's eyes he was still very young. Then, after hearing the guard's words, the guard ran away. No, he went to call for help. And the guard who was in a stalemate, with Wu Ming had his weapon broken under Wu Ming's smile. The guard was shocked and retreated. There was no other way. Wu Ming's invisible telekinesis was too strange. To be honest, what if the next thing to break was his head? At this time, a voice came from the door. Hurry. Someone is causing trouble in Salamandra. It seemed that the other side had called for help. Wu Ming smiled slightly. Mr. Villo, why don't we leave quickly? Ren pulled Wu Ming's hand unnaturally and whispered. Don't worry, Ren. We came with sincerity today. If they want to cause trouble, then let them come. We are not afraid. Wu Ming patted Ren's shoulder confidently, indicating that he should be more confident. However, Ren was about to cry. How is this sincerity? You are clearly here to cause trouble. However, Ren also knew that Wu Ming was half a problem child. Then, Ren gave up persuading Wu Ming, because the other side's people had already surrounded the two of them. Wu Ming looked at the people surrounding him with weapons. These people were all members of the Salamandra community, who had the blood of the alternative dragon. There were even a few alternative flying dragons in the sky that were ridden by the members of Salamandra. As for Salamandra, it was obvious that they were ganging up on him, which attracted the attention of the surrounding passers-by. Moreover, although Salamandra's base was not in the downtown area, it was not in the suburbs either. Therefore, there were many other shops around. To put it simply, a lot of people had gathered around to watch the fun. Chapter 6:23. Look, someone is causing trouble in front of Salamandra. What? Someone actually dares to cause trouble? Don't they know that the ceremony hosted by Salamandra will be opening in 2 days? They've hit the nail on the head. Salamandra has been on full alert for the past 2 days. They're afraid that someone will cause trouble. That's right. If they dare to cause trouble during this period of time, they'll be miserable. But they don't seem to be from the North District. Speaking of which, I heard that in order to make the ceremony go smoothly, Salamandra invited the ruler of the East District. Really? The ruler of the East District, Lord Whiteyiksha, is here? With Wu Ming's super hearing, Wu Ming basically heard all the words of the passers-by without missing anything. However, there was one thing that made Wu Ming feel awkward. It was not strange for the North District to know that the ruler of the East District was Whiteyiksha, but it sounded like they respected Whiteyiksha. But it was also true. Although Whiteyiksha was very casual in front of Wu Ming, and the others like a problematic child, he was still a demon lord with a 2-digit number. Usually he was a very dignified existence to the outside world. Moreover, the ruler of the East District was the guardian that protected the people of the lower class. Naturally, he would be respected. However, if they knew that White Yiksha's true face was actually a problematic child, their belief would probably collapse. At this moment, Wuming suddenly heard a more useful information. Speaking of which, I seem to have seen Lord White Yiksha's figure enter Salamandra's base. White Yiksha is also in Salamandra. Wuming laughed. His laughter became more and more miserable. A thought called causing trouble lingered in Wuming's mind. Looking at Wuming's smile, Ren, who was already extremely worried, became even more worried. I shouldn't have let the Villo accompany me. Instead, I should have let him walk around alone. Ren could not help but speak his mind. However, how could this escape Wuming's eyes and ears? Don't worry, the face that no name lost today when Salamandra unilaterally abandoned the contract. I will take it back in double leader. Wuming emphasized the word leader, which made Ren stunned. After pausing for a few seconds, Ren nodded emotionally. Thank you very much, Mr. Villo. Please help me regain the face of no name, please. Ren bowed to Wuming. Although Ren had always valued peace, he was not a person who would not fight back when he was bullied. In the past, they didn't fight back because they didn't have the strength. But now, the community had taken in a new powerful partner. Since he wasn't strong enough, he had to know how to rely on his companions and trust them. It was because Ren Jin believed that his partner would return one day that he and Black Rabbit worked tirelessly to protect their no-name community. And those partners who left, compared to Letitia who had already returned, believed that the remaining members of the community would protect this home. Wuming suddenly grabbed Ren's arm and lifted his body. How can I let the leader bow to a member, especially in this kind of environment? Wuming said as he casually looked at the people of Salamandra, who had a fierce look on their faces. Ren also reacted. Ren, you have to remember, you are the leader of the community. You can't do what you did today again. Wuming warned Ren seriously. Yes, I understand, Mr. Villo. Ren straightened his spine and responded firmly. Then Wuming's face instantly turned into a casual smile. However, you still have a long way to go. Do your best, leader Ren. Wuming smiled and patted Ren's shoulder. Then he looked at the people of Salamandra. What, you're not going to attack? Wuming smiled again. This smile scared the young man who was the first to have his weapon broken by Wu Ming's strange method, and made him retreat. The others also looked nervous. It seemed that the other party knew that their weapons were broken after Wu Ming's strange smile. Needless to say, it must have been the young man who told them. It was also because of their vigilance that this group of people didn't attack Wu Ming rashly. This allowed Wu Ming and Ren to have a rare opportunity to talk while surrounded by people. This was a rare experience. There wouldn't be a next time. Isn't Salamandra famous for ganging up on people? But today, I've seen the hospitality of Salamandra. Wu Ming smiled lightly. However, this smile coupled with this sentence was really ridiculing. This made the people of Salamandra grit their teeth. Their faces that were originally red because of the fire dragon's blood turned red once again. However, Wu Ming's words reminded them that Salamandra's tactics were group battles. There was no such thing as a one-on-one duel. Therefore, they were no longer polite. Everyone attacked together. Let him see the power of Salamandra. Among them, the young man who had his weapon broken by Wu Ming's telekinesis changed his weapon and pointed it at Wu Ming. In his opinion, Wu Ming's ability definitely couldn't be used on so many people. Moreover, they were a community that was good at group battles. Therefore, attacking together was the best choice. Oh! The people of Salamandra roared, cheering themselves on. However, when this group of people was about to rush up and attack Wu Ming closed his eyes. Looks like I'll have to teach you guys what it means to have a person stronger than you. Following that, Wu Ming suddenly opened his eyes. In an instant, an invisible pressure engulfed the surroundings. They couldn't move. Although that was the case, their bodies were trembling instinctively. A pair of golden vertical pupils were engraved in the hearts of every Salamandra member present. At the same time, the fear of Wu Ming was also engraved in their hearts. Because of Wu Ming's precise manipulation, the passers-by and Run were not affected at all. In their opinion, it was just that Salamandra members had stopped immediately after moving. What? What happened? I don't know. Why did Salamandra stop fighting? Could it be that they were scared stiff? How could that be? The two people that they surrounded didn't do anything. What the hell is this? However, it wasn't that everyone didn't have the insight. I think I saw that man close his eyes and then open them again. The members of Salamandra stopped moving the moment he opened his eyes. Really? You didn't see wrongly, right? Is it really as scary as you say? It can't be some kind of powerful gift, right? Because these passers-by didn't dare to get too close to Salamandra, encircling Wuming and Run. They didn't see the change in Wuming's eyes. At this time, a lazy but familiar voice came from Salamandra's main door. Wuming. It ends here, kid. Chapter 624. Hearing the familiar voice, Wuming looked at the door. You're finally out, White Yiksha, Wuming said as he removed the pressure on the members of Salamandra. Crash. The weapons scattered on the ground. The members of Salamandra who were originally holding these weapons also sat on the ground one by one, panting heavily as if they were drowning and had just been fished out of the water. As if confirming Wuming's words, White Yiksha slowly walked out of the door. However, White Yiksha wasn't the only one who walked out. Behind him was a man and a woman with dragon horns. They were obviously members of Salamandra. The man was tall and had a fiery red crew cut that was 10 centimeters long. He wore a long jacket with long sleeves that reached his ankles. Perhaps it was because of custom or something else. The man wore cool sandals on his feet. There was also an extraordinary-looking sword at his waist. The man's face was rather capable and experienced. On his forehead above his eyebrows, there was an obvious bulge that extended to both sides of his forehead. Compared to the other members of Salamandra, it was thicker and sturdier, with dragon horns growing out from it. Wuming could tell that this guy's viper dragon bloodline was quite advanced. However, Wuming was a little unhappy when he looked at him and Run with disgust from time to time. Wuming was sure that if this guy was not the leader, then he was a member of the upper echelons who knew about no name. Looking at the other person beside him, it was a young girl with a small body. Her height was only half the height of the man beside her, and she looked abnormally young. The young girl wore a special golden hair accessory on her head. Her fiery red hair was tied into a high ponytail at the back of her head. Her forehead was slightly parted in the middle, and there were 2 long vertical strands of hair on both sides of her head. The girl's upper body was only covered by clothes that covered her chest and a small section of her arm, looking rather open. Her lower body was a more conservative skirt that reached below her knees and had a flame dragon pattern printed on it. The girl's feet were also wearing the same cool open-toed shoes as the man beside her. The girl's waist did not have a sword, but the girl's wrists and ankles had golden ornaments, which added a hint of appeal to the girl. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Asterisk. Although it was a little embarrassing to think like this, Wuming had no choice. The young girl's clothes were a little revealing, but looking at her age, it was not considered revealing. In Wuming's opinion, the other party should be, no, to be precise, she was indeed not a young girl. She should be a young girl. In Wuming's opinion, this young girl was probably not an adult yet. Or rather, this young girl looked about the same age as Run. From the small and weak dragon horns on both sides of the young girl's forehead, which almost made Wuming doubt if they were real, it could be seen that the young girl's age was probably not that old. More importantly, there was a hint of panic in the girl's eyes. It was exactly the same as Ren's eyes when Wuming saw Ren. However, this made Wuming certain one thing, and that was, this young girl was probably the current leader of Salamandra. After all, if it was not an important position, Salamandra would not let such a young girl follow White Yiksha and that man out. It was not like No Name had no one to use, so they let Rin become the leader of the community. And when Wuming was sizing up the young girl, the man beside her began to frown even more. No Name guy, put away your rude gaze. The man loudly scolded Wuming. This scolding made the young girl's body tremble slightly. Wuming's eyes flashed. In fact, if it was not for the fact that he saw the same hard work in the young girl's eyes as Ren, Wuming would probably think that the young girl was holding the emperor to order his subjects by the man beside her. What a coincidence. White Yiksha, why are you here? Ignoring the particularly arrogant man, Wuming looked at White Yiksha. This made the man frown even more, but because of White Yiksha and the surrounding passers-by, as well as his own subordinates, he temporarily endured. Don't you know? Salamandra is the community that is holding this fire dragon's birth ceremony. Didn't I tell you? White Yiksha was surprised. As expected. Wuming nodded knowingly. This was why the passers-by said that Salamandra had quit smoking in order to hold the ceremony, and why they said that they had invited White Yiksha. After hearing the passers-by's words, Wuming began to make guesses. In the end, the truth was just as Wuming had guessed. Then he looked at the young girl behind White Yiksha. This so-called fire dragon's birth ceremony was probably related to this young child. However, you really didn't tell us that No Name's ally is holding this ceremony, White Yiksha. As Wuming spoke, he pushed Run, who had not spoken since he saw the two people behind White Yiksha, forward. Wuming's words seemed normal, but in fact, there was a hidden killing intent. This was undoubtedly mocking Salamandra's unilateral act of breaking the contract. The expression of the man behind White Yiksha changed. He probably understood it, but the young girl did not change at all. Now, because she was not shrewd enough, she did not understand the meaning behind Wuming's words. White Yiksha's expression also showed a hint of embarrassment. After all, it was her mistake this time. She knew that Salamandra and No Name used to be allies, but because of the big changes between No Name and Salamandra, coupled with White Yiksha's carelessness, it led to this accident. It's just No Name. It's no longer qualified to be our ally. The man did not hold back this time, or rather, he had reached his limit. He directly said, "It's just a mere." This made the passers-by and Salamandra members stunned. It seemed like this nameless No Name was really an ally of Salamandra. However, the man did not care about other people's gazes. His expression did not change. However, the young girl's face turned slightly red. She looked a little embarrassed. After all, Salamandra was the one who unilaterally broke the contract. They did not have the advantage. Seeing the disharmony in the scene, White Yiksha tried to smooth things over. "All right, everyone. Let's go in and have a chat." Wuming and Ren naturally did not mind. The young girl from No Name did not disagree. However, the man was unhappy that mere No Name had entered his community. "I'm helping you, Mandela. You don't want to continue making a fool of Salamandra, right?" White Yiksha whispered to the man named Mandela. However, this silence was only for the passers-by and Salamandra members who were sitting on the ground. To Wuming and the others, this little bit of sound could be heard. In the end, Mandela frowned and nodded helplessly. "All right then." Chapter 625. Wuming brought Ren and followed White Yiksha into Salamandra's base without any hesitation. They entered Salamandra's living room. When they arrived at the living room, White Yiksha and Wuming did not stand on ceremony. They went straight to the guest seats and sat down. This made Ren a little nervous. He kept complaining helplessly. "Is it really okay to be so casual?" Then, Wuming pulled Ren to the seat and pressed him down. Mandela and the girl made some arrangements for the Salamandra members who were frightened by Wuming. Not long after, they arrived at the living room. After Mandela and the girl arrived at the living room, they walked to the main seat. Immediately afterward, as expected by Wuming, the person who sat in the main seat was the girl, not Mandela. Mandela stood beside the girl, acting as her second-in-command, advisor, or something like that. Following that, the leader of Salamandra, who was the host of the event, opened her mouth to speak. "Let me introduce myself first. I'm Shadora Turturek. I'm the new leader of the Salamandra community. Please forgive our community members for offending you just now." The girl named Shadora looked apologetic. It seemed that Shadora had learned the reason for the incident when she went to deal with the Salamandra members who were frightened by Wuming. Although from the words of the Salamandra member, Wuming seemed to be the troublemaker, Shadora knew her own people well. She was afraid that things were not that simple. Moreover, from the conversation between the other party and White Yiksha, the relationship between the two seemed to be good. It was impossible for someone who could be looked up to by White Yiksha to be a sinister villain. Therefore, Shadora directly apologized to Wu Ming. It's okay. I'm not a calculative person. The little lesson I gave them just now was enough. Wu Ming waved his hand, indicating that she did not need to take it to heart. This made Shadora smile. However, Mandela was not slow. It's just no name. I let you in because of Lord White Yiksha. Don't push your luck. Mandela looked at Wu Ming angrily. Brother Mandela, don't be like this. Shadora pulled Mandela's sleeve a little timidly. Through Shadora's words, Wu Ming knew that the two of them were brother and sister. Not only that, but Wu Ming also gleaned more information from these few words. Looking at Shadora's expression, it was likely that Salamandra and No Name's unilateral abandonment of the agreement was mainly due to Mandela's contribution. The treacherous fellow really has the guts to say such things, Lord Mandela of Salamandra. Wu Ming emphasized the word Lord and smiled, mocking Mandela quite powerfully. You. Mandela was furious. His hand instantly reached for the sword at his waist, looking like he wanted to go forward and slash Wu Ming. But then, a pair of golden vertical pupils stared at Mandela, causing Mandela to freeze on the spot. Without power, you can naturally be bullied by others at will. That is the law of all worlds and all regions. Wu Ming stared at Mandela with his golden pupils, and said word by word. However, after the other party has power, it can't continue, because then those who take the initiative to bully will pay an irreversible price. The pressure released by Wu Ming gathered on Mandela. Not only was Mandela unable to move, but he was even close to death. Brother Mandela? I'm sorry, Lord Villo. Please forgive my brother's rudeness. I'm leaving you. Shadora's first sentence was a surprise at Mandela's current state, and the last few sentences were pleading to Wu Ming. She even stood up and looked like she wanted to kneel. It was because she also sensed that Mandela was in danger at the moment. For her brother's life, there was nothing to hesitate about. However, when Shadora bent down, she found that she could not bend down anymore. It was as if she was held up by an invisible force. At this moment, White Yiksha, who had watched a lot of drama, spoke. All right, Villo, give me some face. Hearing White Yiksha's words, Wu Ming's eyes turned from golden vertical pupils to the usual red pupils. The pressure on Mandela also disappeared. Ha ha ha. Mandela, who felt relieved of a heavy burden, took a few steps back. He leaned against the wall when he almost fell, panting heavily. Ignoring Mandela, Wu Ming looked at Shadora. I just taught our leader. Now I'll teach you, Shadora. As the leader of Salamandra, kneeling to the enemy because your family is being held hostage is a betrayal to Salamandra. Wu Ming reprimanded Shadora mercilessly. Then, Wu Ming removed the telekinesis on Shadora. Remember, before being your brother's sister, you have the identity of the leader of Salamandra. Shadora was a little down, but seeing that Wu Ming let her brother go, she nodded honestly. Yes, I understand, Lord Villo. Then Wu Ming patted Run, who heaved a sigh of relief. This gave Run a fright. White Yiksha, since Salamandra doesn't welcome us for the time being, we'll leave for now. If there's anything, let Salamandra come to us with sincerity. With that, Wu Ming didn't give Shadora and White Yiksha a chance to speak. He pulled Run and left Salamandra's meeting room. Really, this kid? White Yiksha shook her head helplessly, but she didn't say anything. After all, she didn't explain clearly that Salamandra, who unilaterally abandoned their alliance with No Name, was the community that organized the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. It was considered a dereliction of duty on White Yiksha's part. After Shadora saw Wu Ming leave, she quickly ran to Mandela, who was leaning against the wall. Brother Mandela, are you okay? Shadora helped Mandela up. She wanted to help her brother to the nearest leader's seat, but Mandela pushed her away forcefully. He wasn't the leader, so he couldn't sit on the leader's throne. That was the reflection of Mandela's heart. Mandela, who had a strong sense of self, wouldn't sit on the leader's seat. That was one of the few advantages of Mandela's annoying stubbornness. I didn't expect that such a person would join No Name. Mandela said with lingering fear. That's the result of your lack of judgment. You can't blame others, Mandela. White Yiksha opened the origami paper in a bad mood and habitually covered the lower half of her face. Fortunately, you really provoked him this time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to save you. Mandela listened to White Yiksha's words and nodded slowly. I understand. I won't clash with that person again. I hope so. White Yiksha walked toward the door after she finished speaking. When White Yiksha turned around, Mandela's eyes showed a hint of conflicting worry and relief. Chapter 626. Wuming and Ren walked out of Salamandra's conference room. Along the way, no one from Salamandra stopped Wuming and Ren. It seemed that everyone in Salamandra knew how powerful this seemingly ordinary young man was. Then Wuming and Ren came to the street. Some passers-by who saw what happened looked at Wuming in awe. The people of Salamandra were shocked by this powerhouse's inexplicable method, which made these passers-by respect him. But fortunately, because of this respect, these passers-by did not bother Wuming, which was what Wuming wanted to see. Then Wuming made a suggestion. It's still early, let's walk around a little. Ren nodded. It was indeed quite early, so he was not in a hurry to find a hotel to rest. On the way, Wuming and Ren chatted casually. Ren, do you know Shadora? Ren was taken aback by Wuming's sudden question, but Ren immediately reacted and nodded his head. Yes, 3 years ago, before No Name was attacked by the Demon King, our community and Salamandra had worked together many times. In addition, Shadora and I are of the same age, so we knew each other. As Ren spoke, a smile appeared on his face as if he recalled the time when No Name met Shadora before she was attacked by the Demon King. But then, Ren's smile turned into a bitter smile. Wuming naturally understood the meaning behind it. It was nothing more than the same things, but people had changed. 3 years ago, the two of them were still living a carefree and peaceful life, but 3 years later, the two of them had become the leaders of their own community, and their respective communities had also experienced different degrees of attacks. Although Salamandra still had the ability to hold a large-scale festival, it could be seen that Salamandra was not as relaxed as it seemed on the surface from the fact that Shadora had become the leader of the Salamandra community. The changes that Salamandra had undergone in the past 2 years were not a joke. Moreover, when Salamandra invited White Yiksha to hold a festival together, it could be seen that the other party had some unspeakable difficulties. Suddenly, as if he had just reacted, Ren thanked Wuming. By the way, Mr. Villo, thank you for what you said to Shadora. These words were not only useful to Shadora, but also to Ren because both of them were unqualified leaders. Simply put, they were quite immature and still needed more training. It's nothing. I can also see that Shadora is not as scheming as her brother, so I chose to help her. He did not continue to attack Mandela was not only to give face to Yiksha, but also to help Shadora. Only Mandela and Shadora could be considered decent in the huge Salamandra. After all, Salamandra was a community that focused on group battles, and individual strength was not the priority. However, the two of them were only good in Salamandra. In No Name, not to mention Wuming and 16 Knights, Shadora might not even be able to win against Haruai Toshiaki and Jiyuki. No, it should be said that the immature Shadora was unlikely to be able to deal with Jiyuki, who grew up in a scheming environment, and Haruai Toshiaki, who came from the future with advanced ideas, unless Shadora was far stronger than the two of them. However, in Wuming's opinion, she did not have such strength. At most, Shadora would be able to suppress the two of them, and she did not have the strength to win. As for Mandela, it was hard to say. His shrewdness was deeper than Shadora, and even Haruai Toshiaki and Jiyuki. There was not much difference in strength, but in terms of intelligence, Mandela had a high chance of winning against the two of them. However, this was only Wuming's speculation. There was no absolute chance of winning, just like the Rick that Wuming knew. In Wuming's opinion, if he did not go to that world, Rick would have the possibility of overturning the war through his own efforts, although the possibility was quite slim. However, what humans did not lack the least was possibility, and this principle could also be used on you, Ren. Wuming thought so and looked at Ren, who was deep in thought. Mandela? Is he very scheming? Ren asked in confusion. Although Ren and Shadora did not have much contact with Mandela, in Ren's opinion, Mandela was just a rather strict person who did not want to shame his community. However, if Wuming knew Ren's thoughts, he would not know whether to laugh or cry. However, this was also a good thing about Ren. However, Wuming did not dare to compliment Mandela's unilateral breach of contract as not wanting to shame his community. In Wuming's opinion, this kind of behavior could only be done by people who only cared about profits. However, each person had their own opinion, so Wuming did not expect to persuade Ren. Wuming also began to patiently explain why Ren did not notice Mandela's scheming. How about this? I'll put it simply, Ren. Wuming thought for a moment. Shadora, the leader of Salamandra, is not scheming. You can see that, right? Facing Wuming's question, Ren nodded. In that case, Shadora must have a person who is the opposite of her. What Wuming said was the opposite. He was referring to scheming. Otherwise, Salamandra wouldn't have been able to stay in this 54545 outer gate as a 5-digit community. Ren had only become the leader after No Name had suffered a huge blow. The other communities had no interest in exploiting a community that did not have the slightest bit of profit. Otherwise, No Name would have disbanded a long time ago. How could they have lasted for 3 years? The situation of Salamandra was the same. Shadora became the leader, and Mandela dealt with the dark side for Shadora, who was ignorant of the world. Wuming even suspected that Mandela had other motives for inviting White Yiksha. However, there was insufficient information at the moment, so everything was just a guess. Immediately afterward, Wuming patted Ren's back and smiled slightly. You really have a lot to learn, leader. This made Ren more and more confused, but the considerate person did not continue to ask. Wuming ended the conversation with one sentence. Then, Wuming did not talk to Ren anymore. Instead, he sped up and began to wander around. The Fire Dragon Birth Festival in the North District this time was not for show. Exquisite glass art pieces were placed on the streets for pedestrians to admire. Coupled with the unique architectural style of the North District, not to mention those who had never been to the North District. Even the locals of the North District were affected by the atmosphere before the festival began. Immediately afterward, Wuming looked at the huge red boundary wall in the distance. Salamandra, as the regional ruler and the outer door ruler of the outer door of the 54545, had the authority to make reasonable changes to the boundary wall. Now there was a passage in the boundary wall that had been transformed into an exhibition corridor. It is said that there is an exhibition hall in the boundary wall. Let's go take a look together. Ren looked at Wuming looking at the boundary wall and suggested. Wuming, who had nothing to do, naturally would not reject, and was about to nod in agreement. At that moment, there was an argument in the crowd. Chapter 627. The passers-by began to talk about it. Let's go, I heard you two is here. Are you for real? Seems like it's true. I heard there's you two on the roof over there. Why is you two on the roof? Why would the boxing aristocrats appear on the lower level? Don't worry about it. Let's go and take a look. I haven't seen a boxing aristocrat yet. Wait for me. Me too, wait a minute. Let's go together. Then the passers-by began to move in a certain direction, probably to see the legendary. Tuesday Wuming and Ren did not move, because the two of them had completely heard the passers-by's conversation, and were stunned on the spot. Wuming and Ren looked at each other and nodded. This so-called U2, if Wuming and Ren guess correctly, should be Black Rabbit. I always feel like 16th night, and the others have done something troublesome again. Ren laughed dryly and complained. Sigh. Wuming sighed as well. It turned out that he and Ren were thinking the same thing. Although Wuming had been holed up in the library for a while, Wuming did not really become a shut-in. Wuming still knew some news about the outside world. Wuming still knew about things like, the competition venue was destroyed by a blonde man, the short-haired girl who was loved by animals and caused an animal version of the ghost parade, the girl with long, straight black hair caused a ruckus because someone spoke rudely to her. Wuming was worried that these 3 problem children would cause trouble, so after Black Rabbit chose to follow, he let Letitia follow as well. Letitia, who had recovered her strength, and Black Rabbit, who was not weak, should be able to keep these 3 problem children in check. In the end, Wu-ming still underestimated the ability of these problem children to cause trouble. I'll go take a look first, Ren. You can catch up later. Ren was stunned. However, Wu-ming didn't give Ren time to react. After he finished speaking, Wu-ming jumped and left Ren's side, heading towards the place where the crowd gathered. Wait a minute, Mr. Villo. However, Wu-ming had already arrived at the back of a crowd that had gathered inexplicably. Wu-ming raised his head and looked at the people on the two tall buildings in front of him. Reversing 16 knights and Black Rabbit each occupied a tall building. They looked at each other as if they were two peerless experts. Sure enough, it's 16 knights again. Wu-ming shook his head helplessly. Wu-ming guessed that it was 16 knights in reverse. Among the three problem children, 16 knights was the most difficult to deal with and also had the highest attribute of a problem child. However, at least now he couldn't see Jiufei Niao, Haruai Buyao, and Letitia's figures. The two who wanted to cause trouble were probably subdued by Letitia. What the hell is going on? Wasn't everything fine when I came here? Wu-ming already felt the horror of a problem child. Although Wu-ming was half a problem child, at least Wu-ming wouldn't cause trouble in the place where the ceremony was about to be held. At this time, Wu-ming sensed Letitia's location. At this moment, Letitia was very close to Wu-ming. After becoming Wu-ming's dependent, she was like a radar. Wu-ming could sense her location at any time. Since he already sensed Letitia's location, then he should go and take a look. At least I need to know what happened to make this happen. With this mentality, Wu-ming waved one hand, and the dark purple ripple swallowed Wu-ming like a giant mouth. This made the passers-by who accidentally saw it scared out of their wits. They couldn't even watch the fun and quickly left. In an alley where Black Rabbit and Reverse 16 Knights could be seen confronting each other, Letitia helplessly looked at Reverse 16 Knights and Black Rabbit who were standing on the roof. She then turned her head to look at the two people behind her. Of course, they were two of the three problem children, Jiufei Niao and Haruai Buyao. At this moment, the two of them were tied with a thin black string. Although the string was thin, Haruai Buyao tried to break free with the strength of an elephant, and the string was undamaged. Haruai Buyao's life catalog not only had the ability to communicate with animals, but also the ability to obtain the abilities of these animals, beasts. For example, 2 days ago, it was said that Haruai Buyao participated in White Yiksha's gift competition and became friends with a griffin. He successfully obtained the ability to walk on air. It had to be said that this was an interesting gift. It was worthy of being called the highest grade of human gift. Wu-ming was also classified as a divine beast. If Haruai Buyao could obtain a part of Wu-ming's power, then it would be a huge gain. Not to mention being a tyrant in the Hakata world, Haruai Buyao could be considered an invincible existence in the middle and lower levels. Even in the upper levels of Hakata, Haruai Buyao could occupy a place. If that was the case, then 16 knights wouldn't be able to do anything to Haruai Buyao. However, it wouldn't be that easy to obtain abilities from Wu-ming. As for how to do it, no one knew. Back to the main topic. Letitia looked at Jiufei Niao and Haruai Buyao and began to criticize and educate them. Can't you three problem children be more honest? Even if you don't think for the benevolent master, you should think for Black Rabbit. Look at how angry Black Rabbit was just now. Letitia puffed up her cheeks and was quite angry. However, in the eyes of others, it was more cute than angry. Okay, we were wrong. As the saying goes, people under the eaves have to bow their heads. Jiufei Niao and Haruai Buyao obediently bowed their heads and admitted their mistakes. Then Haruai Buyao and Jiufei Niao began to chat. I didn't expect Letitia to be so strong. Haruai Buyao said with jealousy. Why? Because she was caught in an instant. That's right. We didn't see anyone, but this black rope caught the two of us in an instant. If it wasn't for 16 knights being smart, we would have been caught too. Jiufei Niao looked angrily at the black rope that tied her up like a shadow. Although I lost my divine spark, becoming the master's dependent has greatly increased my power. I'm not any weaker than when I had my divine spark. In fact, I'm even slightly stronger. It's more than enough to catch the two of you. Letitia looked as if she was proud of being Wu-ming's dependent, with a smile on her small face. Tisk X2 it's useless. The master is already here. You disobedient problem children. I'll let the master deal with you later. Letitia smiled at the two of them. Jiufei Niao and Haruai Buyao didn't want to admit defeat and turned their heads away. At this time, Wu Ming's voice was heard. You two are quite stubborn. Chapter 628. Master. Letitia bowed to Wu Ming, who walked out from the shadows to show her respect. Wu Ming waved his hand casually. Although Wu Ming had told Letitia many times that there was no need to bow to him every time she saw him, Letitia was still stubborn and had to bow to Wu Ming every time she saw him. After a while, Wu Ming gave up on persuading Letitia. After all, she wouldn't lose anything by bowing, right? At this time, Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi, who had turned their heads away, turned their heads back. Villa, we are on the same side, right? Haruai Hibakushi looked at Wu Ming stubbornly. Let us go. Jiuyuko didn't hold back and shouted at Wu Ming angrily. Then I'm sorry. Let's not talk about Jiuyuko's attitude first. Wu Ming shrugged and walked in front of Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi. About the problem of being on the same side. I don't think I'm on the same side as you. Traitor. Shameless. Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi looked like they were betrayed by a traitor. If a passerby who didn't know the situation saw it, they would probably think that it was a tragic drama where two righteous girls were betrayed by a man who was supposed to be on the same side as them. If Wu Ming knew what the two of them were like, he would even have a feeling of, could it be that I'm really a traitor and betrayed them? But there was no if. Wu Ming stretched out his hands and hit Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi on the forehead with lightning speed. Ouch, 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 ouch. Jiuyuko couldn't help but tear up. Ouch. Although Haruai Hibakushi didn't seem to be in much pain, his slightly wet eyes proved that he wasn't as relaxed as he looked. Then can you tell me now? What did you guys do to end up like this? However, after Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biyao were humiliated by their enemies, their beliefs became even more firm. They were truly unyielding and indomitable. Rejected. Ditto. After the two of them finished speaking, they turned their heads to the side again. However, as captives, the two of them had no right to speak. Looks like you won't confess if I don't do something ruthless. Wu Ming smiled. However, this smile made Jiuyuasuka and Kasumi's hearts tremble. Their bodies couldn't help but tremble. However, this wasn't enough to convince them. Wu Ming, who knew this, looked at Letitia. How about this, Letitia? You come with me. Let's play with the two of them. What do you think? Wu Ming said as his hands moved, as if he was stretching his muscles and bones. As long as you're happy, master. Letitia nodded with a smile, indicating that she would accompany Wu Ming. Wait a minute, I'm a lady. How can you torture a lady? Don't you dare. Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biyao saw that Wu Ming didn't seem to be joking. The two of them immediately panicked. Scared. Sorry, it's too late. Then Wu Ming smiled mischievously. Instantly, chains appeared out of thin air. Then the chains hung Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biyao up. Their hands were placed horizontally, and their bodies were upright as if Jesus was being tortured. At the same time, the black rope that Letitia tied to the two of them disappeared. Then Wu Ming wrote a few runes in the air that they couldn't understand and slapped the runes in the air. This was a Lune rune technique with a soundproof effect. Then Wu Ming snapped his fingers, and two feathers appeared out of thin air. Wu Ming said as he handed one of the feathers to Letitia. Come, Letitia. Letitia nodded and took the feather. Then, she walked with Wu Ming to Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biyao, who were hung up. Then, under the two's despairing gaze, Wu Ming took off their shoes. About a few minutes later, Wu Ming twisted his waist and moved his body twice. I didn't expect you guys to be so strong. Wu Ming looked at Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biyao, who had taken off their shoes. Their clothes were drenched in sweat, and they were panting as if they had just run a few thousand meters. There was also Sanmao Cat, who wanted to hug Wu Ming's leg to show her loyalty to her master. In the end, she was hung up by Wu Ming's pseudo-heavenly lock. We won't submit. No, that's right. Although the two said so, the exhaustion in their eyes and bodies told them that they couldn't go on anymore. Forget it, I'm not playing anymore. Wu Ming threw away the feather and looked at Letitia, who also threw the feather to the ground. Tell me what's going on, Letitia. Jiu Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao froze. That's right, Letitia knows what happened. Why didn't you ask her earlier? But Wu Ming kindly explained to the two. Wouldn't that be boring? Then Jiu Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao glared at Wu Ming with murderous eyes. But Wu Ming just shrugged happily. Letitia sighed helplessly. That's the punishment for this mess. Letitia looked at Jiu Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao with pity. Then Letitia told Wu Ming the whole story. When the three problem children left the Thousand Eyes branch to go shopping, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia followed them. Perhaps it was because of the supervisor. The three problem children were quite well behaved in the beginning and didn't cause any trouble. But problem children were still problem children. After shopping for a while, the three problem children began to rely on the people in the downtown area to play hide and seek with Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia. Because the three problem children were honest at first, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia relaxed a little. As a result, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia couldn't find the three problem children. But thankfully the two of them still managed to find 16 knights and the other two. They were on top of an extremely tall art building, looking at the scenery outside the 54,545 gate. This caused a commotion among the pedestrians. After all, the building the three problem children were in was a rare piece of art. Knowing that the problem children caused trouble again, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia began to capture the problem children. 16 knights ran away quickly, while Jiu Yuasuke ran away because of her poor physical fitness. When Kasuga Biao was about to leave with Jiu Yuasuke, the two of them were tied up by Letitia with a shadow rope. One of Letitia's gifts, Dragon's Shadow. It was one of Letitia's gifts that had many uses. Wings, weapons, shields, stealth cover. It could be said to be very versatile. And Letitia's strength had recovered to 4 digits. Along with Kasuga Biao, who was half a beat slower because of taking care of Jiu Yuasuke, the two of them were caught together by Letitia. 16 knights and Ryu Yuasuke, on the other hand, were in the same situation as before. Chapter 629. After I caught Miss Asuka and Miss Yao, I was following Black Rabbit and 16 knights in the dark. However, they were too fast, so I couldn't catch up with them. Letitia was referring to small alleys like this one. After that, Master, you came over. Letitia finished her sentence. Wu Ming knew what happened after that, although there wasn't anything else. I understand. Thank you for your hard work, Letitia. Wu Ming patted Letitia's head. Letitia, on the other hand, looked like she was enjoying it. It had to be said that if Letitia's current lowly state and her current expression were seen by those lolicons, who knew how much cuteness they would have. Although Wu Ming wasn't a lolicon, Wu Ming had no self-control when it came to cute lolis. Beast. Pervert. That was what Jiu Asuka and Haruai Hikari said when they saw Wu Ming's happy expression. You two are really energetic. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes and turned to look at Jiu Asuka and Haruai Hikari. This reminded the two of them of the fear of having their souls controlled by feathers. Snap. Wu Ming snapped his fingers, and the silver chains that bound Jiu Asuka and Haruai Hikari were released. With a clattering sound, the chains returned to the ripples at the top. Ouch! Jiu Asuka fell to the ground on her, butt and made a sound of pain. Although Haruai Hikari also fell to the ground on his butt like Jiu Asuka, Haruai Hikari's physical fitness was much higher than Jiu Asuka's, so she didn't feel much pain. However, because of Wu Ming's punishment, the two didn't have much strength at the moment. Otherwise, Haruai Hikari wouldn't have fallen to the ground on his butt. At the same time, Sanmao, who was released by Wu Ming, jumped into Haruai Hikari's arms and meowed worriedly. Then, Wu Ming walked to the two who were sitting on the ground. Jiu Asuka and Haruai Hikari looked at Wu Ming's shadow and couldn't help but tremble. Even Sanmao's fur stood on end. Then Wu Ming personally helped the two of them put on their shoes while Jiu Yuasuke and Haruai Hikari looked on in surprise and embarrassment. Wu Ming clapped his hands and stood up. What happened just now is just a lesson from this time's trouble. Even if you're a problem child, you still have to remember the occasion. Don't do it again. Wu Ming's tone was quite gentle, just like a big brother next door. Furthermore, Wu Ming had personally helped them put on their shoes. This made Jiuyuki and Haruai Hikari blush. Then Wu Ming looked. Letitia, look after them. I'll go check on 16th Knights and Black Rabbit. Yes, master. After Letitia nodded, Wu Ming waved his hand. A dark purple ripple appeared and engulfed Wu Ming. After watching Wu Ming leave, Letitia walked to Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari and stretched out her hands. The ground is cold. Get up, you two. Although Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari wanted to get up by themselves, they didn't have much strength left because of Wu Ming and Letitia's antics. Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari had no choice but to hold Letitia's hand and stand up. How is it? Master is very gentle, right? Letitia's sudden words made Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari, who were patting the dust off themselves, blush. They recalled the scene where Wu Ming helped them put on their shoes. He's just a lecher. That guy treated me like that. Even if it's a punishment, I'll remember it. Jio Asuka glared at Letitia. Letitia had also attacked her just now. Jio Asuka remembered it clearly. Unforgivable. Haruai Hikari hugged Sanmao, who was already out of breath, with a face full of displeasure. However, their reactions were seen as shyness in Letitia's eyes. It could only be said that giving carrots with carrots was very effective, wasn't it? Let's go, Haruai Hikari, Jio Asuka said politely to Haruai Hikari. After Haruai Hikari nodded, Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari looked like they were about to leave. What? You two still want to run? Aren't you afraid of Master's punishment? Letitia looked at the two with a smile. The two trembled. They definitely didn't want to go through that kind of hell again. However, Jio Asuka thought about it again and smiled at Letitia. Villo only asked you to watch over us. He didn't say that we can't leave, Letitia. Jio Asuka called Letitia intimately. Although it was a play on words, Letitia knew that Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari wouldn't cause any more trouble. Moreover, with her around, they wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. If that's the case, then fine. Just like that, Letitia followed Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari in the opposite direction of 16 Knights and Black Rabbit. Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari really wanted to have a good time shopping. After all, if they were interrupted in the middle of shopping, it would be very unpleasant. While Letitia, Jio Asuka, and Haruai Hikari were shopping, at the tall building where 16 Knights and Black Rabbit were before, a dark purple ripple appeared on one of the tall buildings, and Wu Ming appeared from it. Why was it where they were before? It was because the two of them were no longer there. Seems like I was having too much fun with Jio Asuka and Hikari. Where did 16 Knights and Black Rabbit go? Wu Ming scratched his head. Dong. Suddenly, a loud sound was heard from somewhere not far away. Wu Ming turned around and saw that the top of a clock tower had broken for some unknown reason, and the big bell on the clock tower had fallen along with it. With his excellent eyesight, Wu Ming saw 16 Knights and Black Rabbit falling along with the top of the clock tower. Needless to say, the clock tower's destruction must have been done by 16 Knights. The big bell, along with a large number of small and large stones, fell onto the street, causing panic among the onlookers on the street. It should be said that it was impossible not to panic because the stones were falling directly onto the crowd. The people below the clock tower started to panic as they scurried in all directions. However, due to the height of the clock tower and the fact that the residents of the box court world were people who could easily accept sudden surprises, it only took a few seconds for the crowd to escape. Evacuate. However, if the stones and the top of the clock tower were allowed to fall, even if it did not cause any casualties, it would definitely cause damage to the street. Geez, always giving people trouble. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly. Immediately after, the falling bell tower and stones seemed to have been frozen in midair. Chapter 630. The residents who retreated to the surrounding safe area looked at the strange scene of the bell tower being fixed in midair, and they all discussed in surprise. What's going on? I don't know. Could it be a gift from a powerhouse? I don't know, but this disaster is stopped. Thank God. Wu Ming used his telekinesis to fly to the side of the falling object that was controlled by his telekinesis. Looking at the wreckage, Wu Ming was even more certain that this was 16 Knights' masterpiece. There was no pattern, and the traces of destruction were obvious. Other than 16 Knights, Silent Cries didn't think that there was anyone else who could be like a berserker. Wu Ming had a way to recreate a replacement on the top of the bell tower with advanced item creation, but it wasn't easy. He had to let Wu Ming analyze the structure of the bell tower. If only Kalis was here. Wu Ming sighed. Wu Ming recognized the importance of Kalis more than once. If Kelly was here, it would only take a second for Silent Wonder to complete the scan. Silent Wonder would then be able to use his advanced item creation. But after all, Kalis was now with his original body, and his original body was nowhere to be found. It could only be said that things didn't go as planned. However, Wu Ming wasn't a pessimistic person, so he didn't dwell on this issue. Let's talk about the repair later. Wu Ming looked at Black Rabbit and 16 Knights who had landed on the ground below. With the strength of the two, they naturally wouldn't die from falling from a high altitude, and it was naturally even more impossible for them to be injured. The two landed safely on the ground, but there was a strange thing. They were holding each other's arms. Moreover, there was a contract document. It seemed that the two had made some kind of bet. However, it looked like it was a tie because both of them looked unhappy at the moment. Wu Ming landed directly below. Before reaching the ground, Wu Ming heard the complaints of 16 Knights. I absolutely can't accept it. It's obvious that my side is faster. 16 Knights, who had never lost in games, was very unhappy about the draw. Boxing's judgment won't be wrong. If you have any opinions you can appeal, but the result won't change. Black Rabbit was quite satisfied with the result of the draw. Anyway, her goal had been achieved. From the point of being able to issue any order to 16 Knights unconditionally, Black Rabbit had already profited. Being able to make a problem child obey an order, no matter how you think about it, isn't it? Wait for me you two. Wu Ming interrupted at the right time. Yo, isn't this little brother? What a coincidence. When 16 Knights saw Wu Ming, it was as if all the previous unhappiness had disappeared. Do you want to have a match with me? The winner will get the chance to give orders to the other party. However, Wu Ming pointed behind him. You guys deal with them first. Wu Ming's tone was full of helplessness. Black Rabbit and 16 Knights looked behind Wu Ming, but the problem was that there was nothing above. Wu Ming kindly reminded. Black Rabbit and reverse 16 Knights raised their heads and saw a group of flying dragon subspecies descending towards them. Among them, at the forefront, there was a man who didn't ride a dragon. That was Wu Ming's old friend, the scheming man Mandela. Huh. What is that? The straightforward 16 Knights expressed that he didn't know what those people were doing. That's the military police belonging to Salamandra. Black Rabbit showed an expression of being finished. Oh, that is to say they are here to catch us. 16 Knights had a burning look on his face. Please don't be so happy, Mr. 16 Knights. We've gotten into quite a big mess. Black Rabbit was mad at 16 Knights' cheerful and optimistic attitude. More than once, Black Rabbit had the urge to strangle 16 Knights to death. We are finished this time. Black Rabbit bent down dejectedly, looking like he had lost his life. You two don't talk later. I will deal with this old friend. Wu Ming looked at the approaching Mandela and said to Black Rabbit and 16 Knights without looking back. Oh, this is going to be interesting. 16 Knights' reversal looked like he was waiting to watch a good show. He naturally understood what Wu Ming meant by old friend. Mr. Villo, do you know the people from Salamandra? Black Rabbit obviously didn't understand that Wu Ming's old friend was derogatory. In short, don't talk. As soon as Wu Ming finished speaking, the military police from Salamandra landed. Thieves in front, don't move. Mandela acted as if he didn't know Wu Ming and roared at Black Rabbit and 16 Knights behind Wu Ming. But Mandela's words actually included Wu Ming. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes. It seemed that this guy was a little more powerful than Wu Ming thought. But it's just a little bit more powerful. Give me some face, Mandela. The two behind are my people. There are no casualties in this incident, and I will personally fix the clock tower. How about it? Wu Ming said, his whole body exuding a dangerous aura. This aura made the flying dragon subspecies ridden by the Salamandra military police feel uneasy and began to become restless. But the Salamandra military police also had some skills, and none of the flying dragon subspecies were out of control. Black Rabbit also felt Wuming's strong aura. Although Wuming did it for them, he was a little uneasy. After all, they were outsiders. They caused trouble in other people's territory, and their attitude was so tough in the end. It was inevitable that people would feel uneasy. However, for Wuming, his companions were the most important. As long as they didn't make any big mistakes, if Wuming had the ability, he wouldn't mind covering up for his companions. After all, you couldn't expect a problem child to correct his mistakes. Therefore, weakness was the original sin. This was still the case where Wuming gave face to the other party. If it was White Yiksha's people who caused such a disaster, Mandela would probably turn a blind eye. Wuming's request with a threatening attitude made Mandela very uncomfortable, but he already knew that the other party was a powerhouse who was not weaker than White Yiksha, so his attitude needed to be slightly changed. As early as when he rushed over, he saw Wuming with this group of criminals, so they must be a group. But since the military police had already come out, there was no reason to return without any results. It would be too embarrassing. However, it was still possible to turn a blind eye to it now. As suspects, the two of them must go to Salamandra with our military police. Without any superfluous words, Mandela put forward his bottom line. Of course. Wuming nodded. Since the other party gave him face, Wuming naturally wouldn't refuse. Letting Black Rabbit and 16 Knights go back with Salamandra was a small punishment for the two. Although it was impossible to learn from going back to the 16 Knights, it was impossible. Then please. Chapter 631. Wuming brought Black Rabbit and 16 Knights with him, and followed Mandela's military police to Salamandra's base. Wuming didn't care about the destruction of the bell towers that were fixed in the air by Wuming's telekinesis. This became the scene of the fire dragon's birth ceremony, attracting many people to come and see the falling objects hanging in the air. It could be considered a blessing in disguise. With Wuming's telekinesis, it wouldn't affect anything if he just controlled the falling objects from Salamandra's base. Therefore, Wuming didn't care about it for the time being. Let the falling objects stay in the air, and deal with the matter in front of him first. Salamandra's conference room, on the wide rectangular conference table. Shadora sat at the head of the table, Mandela sat on Shadora's left, and White Yiksha sat on Shadora's right. On both sides of the three sat a few higher-ups of Salamandra, but it was obvious that they were all gathered together. When Wuming first met White Yiksha, only Shadora and Mandela accompanied him. In other words, only Mandela and Shadora were the real higher-ups, and the others weren't considered higher-ups. Or rather, they were Mandela's trusted aides. And for this meeting with no name, Mandela pulled a few of his trusted aides over. After all, when facing no name, only Shadora and Mandela were there. It was inevitable that it would be rude. From Mandela's point of view, among the two powerhouses present, White Yiksha was obviously leaning towards no name, and Wuming was completely on the side of no name, so he had to treat no name with caution. Even if Mandela looked down on the other side as a community, Mandela still had to be polite. On the seat opposite Shadora, Run, the leader of no name, sat there. On the way here with Salamandra, Wuming and the others happened to see Run with a helpless and slightly panicked face, so Wuming brought their leader over. However, inexplicably starting a meeting with Salamandra made Run quite nervous. The other members of No Name sat on both sides of Run. On Ren's left was Wuming, and on his right was 16 Knights. It had to be said that 16 Knights, as a suspect, was able to sit here was thanks to Wuming. Otherwise, with Mandela who looked down on No Name, 16 Knights who was of low birth and caused trouble, would be punished by Mandela. Although Mandela would probably be taught a lesson by 16th Knight. Immediately, on 16 Knights' right side sat Jiyuasu and Sat. Good heavens, this is a group of problem children. Although Jiyuasu ants brought Letitia to go shopping, when Wuming found Ren, he also found the three of them. After all, it was not easy for the members of No Name to gather, So Wuming did not give Jiuyuasu Ants a chance to go shopping. Instead, he let Letitia bring the two of them to follow Wuming to Salamandra's base. After all, No Name still had to talk with Salamandra. As for Letitia and Black Rabbit, they sat on Wuming's left side. Although Black Rabbit and 16 Knights got into trouble together, but with the name of Hakata nobility, even Mandela did not want to pursue the responsibility of Black Rabbit as a Moon Rabbit. It had to be said that the Hakata nobility, the Moon Rabbit race, was really a jack of all trades in the Hakata world. No matter who it was, they would have respect for the Moon Rabbit race. Therefore, even if Black Rabbit was a member of No Name, Salamandra still easily forgave her. Finally, there was Letitia. Although Letitia considered herself as Wuming's maid in No Name, but to outsiders, no one would think of Letitia as a maid. If a tiger was full, it would not hurt you, but would you really dare to sleep next to a tiger? You would be scared to death. This analogy was very apt for Letitia. Even if Letitia was a maid, they would only think that it was the bad taste of the owner who owned Letitia. They would not dare to really see Letitia as a maid. Let's not talk about ordering her around. If you let a 4-digit person stand in front of Salamandra, a 5-digit person, listen to people talk, even if Letitia would agree, would Salamandra dare to do so? A 4-digit person was a 4-digit person, belonging to the upper echelons of Hakata. As a 4-digit person, Letitia completely had the qualifications to sit next to Wuming. And Letitia also understood this principle, so under Wuming's instructions, she sat next to Wuming. Seeing that everyone was present as the host, Shadora spoke. Regarding the destruction of the sacrificial bell tower by Mr. 16 Knights and Miss Black Rabbit, because there were no casualties and the street was not damaged, Salamandra decided not to pursue the matter. However, the price is that No Name will be responsible for repairing the damaged bell tower. Does No Name have any objections? Shadora first made a ruling on the disaster caused by the actions of Black Rabbit and 16 Knights. But as Shadora said, because there were basically no losses, No Name only needed to repair the bell tower. In this regard, Mandela had no objections. After all, even if he didn't give face to No Name, he had to give face to White Yiksha and Wuming, right? One was the person who led No Name here, and the other was a powerful person in the No Name community. Even if he wanted to throw a tantrum, he had to hold it in. No Name has no objections to Salamandra's decision. This sentence was said by Run. After all, if the communication between communities was not spoken by someone other than Run, it would inevitably cause the community to lose face. Wuming and 16 Knights knew this, so they didn't speak. However, when 16 Knights saw Ren's body trembling slightly due to nervousness, he gently patted Ren's back. Ren glanced at 16 Knights, and under 16 Knights' trusting smile, Ren gradually overcame his fear. With a big brother, like 16 Knights, Wuming didn't need to comfort Ren. The problem of Black Rabbit and 16 Knights' destruction had come to an end, so next should be the main event. Then regarding the birth of the Fire Dragon and the Demon King's attack, do you have any preparations? Wuming took the lead to open the door to this topic, but this surprised Run and Black Rabbit. Mr. Villo, why did you? Black Rabbit wanted to say something but stopped. Clearly, Black Rabbit was concerned about why Wuming exposed this information. Because Salamandra must have known about this long ago. Am I right, White Yiksha? You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.